Hi everyone, I'm Abi Stevens. I'm an illustrator and product designer, I guess. I design my own products and sell them in my online shop and at events. I create a lot of work that's designed to empower other people with chronic illnesses and mental health problems, as well as exploring, sort of the darker side um, of those issues in my personal work. Well, I've always been into art, but I think for a long time it was more about escapism than expression. So it was all fantastical things and, escaping into another world. But a few years ago, I developed some severe chronic migraine. Um, I've always had them, and they've been related to stress and to my ADHD my whole life. Um, but there was a period of time where I was bedridden for quite a few months, and I couldn't work at all. And when I did come back to actually drawing and creating art, I found that I wanted to do something that was that would help me to process what I'd been going through. And since then, my work has become a lot more personal and I think a lot more emotive. So it was a really difficult experience for me, but I think that now I find it easier to express emotion and feeling through my work, and it's helped me to connect with my audience in a way that I didn't before. Since that time, I think that my work has evolved to become a more direct reflection of who I am, how I feel, and the things that I care about. So my product designs are sort of an expression of love and support, and they're designed to empower and uplift other people in the chronic illness community, because the people that I met in that community online through social media really helped me to get through that that tough time when I realised that my conditions were now disabling. And I wanted to give something back to the community, and there's sort of a gap. There's not a lot of products around that are designed specifically for our community, particularly from like a trained artist perspective, I guess. So I felt like that was a gap that I could fill, and yeah, it's just led to my work being more personal and more fulfilling at the same time. So I've got quite a few pins and things for people with various chronic illnesses, and I want to design some things to empower people with ADHD and autism, other mental illnesses and neurodivergence. Whenever anyone asks me to pick my favourite of anything, I'm like, I think different parts of it I enjoy the most depending on my mood at the time. So I actually really enjoy the research part because I love learning new things and finding new visual reference points. And yeah, I kind of get to indulge my hyper focus and to do like a deep dive on a new topic and just find interesting snippets and things that inspire me. So even if the subject I'm given at first doesn't sound that interesting, I usually find with a bit of research I can find some little hidden gem that connects it to the things that are important to me. So that's really cool. And then coming up with the concept and the composition, it's like a new puzzle every time you start a new project. So every new project that I start has its own problems, its own puzzle. That's one of the best things about my job. It just suits my ADHD really well. I can indulge all of my interests and curiosities in one job. I think that'd probably be the sketching stage, because although I enjoy the puzzle, I sometimes get frustrated because I feel like my artistic skill doesn't measure up to my imagination of what the illustration is going to be. It's like that gap between your analytical knowledge of art and your artistic skill. They don't increase at the same rate. So it can make you really judgmental of your work. So sometimes at that stage when I'm fleshing out the shape of things, I have a bit of an imposter syndrome to work through. So that's probably the hardest part. I don't think I'd be the same artist that I am today without it. It helps me to make connections between concepts and sort of springboard into new ideas from, the small things I was talking about, the research process. There's a sort of specific joy about that I think is very ADHD kind of to the core. I'm not sure that I would be as invested in that if I didn't have it. And yeah, it gives me that level of enthusiasm to dedicate to each project, which I think is really important. I mean, I can't really think of many other jobs that would allow me to say I could work on a kid's book about Egyptian history, and then a book cover for a fantasy book with dragons, and then an article about global warming. There's so many different things that you can do with it. The possibilities are endless. I think concept-wise, lately, a lot of my work comes from my own experiences or causes that I care about. So I've done some work on pollution, for example. I still really love mythology, but at the moment the focus of my work is more on mental health and chronic illness, that kind of thing. In terms of visual inspiration, I really enjoy looking at different historical forms of art. So stained glass windows, illuminated manuscripts, just sort of architectural details, or those sort of swirls in the borders of things I find really interesting. I like to add some of those details to my own work. A bit of symbolism as well, language of flowers. So maybe other people wouldn't notice that, but I know that flower means something specific. I enjoy that. Yeah, and there's a lot of symbolism attached to different animals as well, and it varies from culture to culture. So depending on the context, the meaning of the symbolism might change. And yeah, I just find all of that really interesting. It kind of connects to me to mythology, which it's these all sorts of bizarre and fantastical creatures and stories, but they're almost always rooted in real life values somewhere. It's a symbolic story. It comes from a lot of different places, and I kind of like to piece things together from different inspiration sources. Motivation is one I feel quite strongly about, actually, in terms of this. I think there is absolutely a difference between inspiration and motivation. And I could lie around all day with dozens of ideas floating in my head, but that's an exercise in imagination, and that's separate from the motivation to actually turn them into finished artwork. I think that ADHD is not a case of lacking motivation. It's an executive function disorder, and it's the functions that stand between the idea and the work, not a lack of motivation. I have all of these ideas and I would love to make all of them, but my executive function and lack of time make it difficult for me to do all of that. It's almost like being handicapped by inspiration in a way, because the motivation is there to create, but in order to start creating, you need to get through all these executive function barriers. So prioritizing, planning, time management, task initiation, what do I make first? Which is the best idea? How should I start? Where do I find my references? What is this for? Who am I going to sell it to? That kind of thing. Decision paralysis is so painful, and we're taught by society that not completing things makes us lazy and unmotivated. But most of the time, when I'm talking to other ADHD people, we really, really want to do that thing. We want to be productive. We want to live in a clean house and make lots of work and be on time to our social obligations. Motivation isn't the problem. It's executive function that's the problem. And all we want is to understand why we can't do the thing and to find tools to help us work around them. And that situation just doesn't make sense to a neurotypical person. And you can tell someone over and over again, I really want to do this, but my brain won't let me. And they're just, unless you've experienced depression or anxiety or ADHD or something similar, I don't think they can really understand what that's like, because to them, motivation and action are simultaneous. They're like, oh, I need to brush my teeth. I will go do that immediately. Whereas, for ADHD people, tasks like going to brush your teeth, it doesn't become routine. It's always difficult to make the decision to get up and go brush your teeth every day. It's so different from what we're told motivation is like, but I really do believe that they're separate things. Yeah, we've just been talking about, really, that I think the key really is to finding methods to overcome your executive function. So it's not necessarily the motivation, it's finding ways to initiate tasks. I'll find, if I just decide that I'm going to put the washing in, and I manage to get up and go and do that, I'll go into the kitchen and go, oh, I haven't washed up, I'll do the washing up. And then when you've done that, one task leads into another. It's a sort of cascading effect. But if I'm really stuck, I find it really helpful to do kind of a brain dump, just write down everything that's going through my mind right then, because I'm quite often I'm just paralyzed by indecision. I've got 20 things in my head going, oh, you should be doing this, 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 and this. If I can get it all down on paper, or like call someone up who doesn't mind listening and just like brain dump at them verbally, then quite often just through that process I realise that I know what I need to do, and my own priorities kind of reveal themselves to me through the process, and I can then break it down and focus on like the first small step. It makes for a much smoother transition from like writing about the task to actually starting it and focusing on that small little bit at the beginning, not getting overwhelmed by like the whole finished job. I think we process auditory and written information differently to how we process our own thoughts. So basically externalizing your like inner monologue can help you have a different perspective on it and find some shortcuts around your executive function. I think, as you were saying earlier, that like the ADHD community is the key for things like this. Like, there's nothing quite like talking to someone else who has ADHD, who can understand, you know, your perspective and how you're feeling, and try and offer you ways to deal with it that are not like patronizing, and they're not based on misunderstandings about how your brain works. So, I mean, I sometimes join these monthly Zoom meetups, which for an adult with ADHD group here in the UK, which has been amazing, because every month it's like a reminder, like you're having a tough time, and then you get on call and you talk to these people and you're like, I'm not a weird alien who just can't do things everyone else can do. Like, you know, there are lots of other people who feel the same way I do and who struggle with the same things that I struggle with. And I think that gives you like a sense of belonging and a sense of being understood that really helps you to have confidence to kind of make changes in your own life and kind of believe that you can do things and you can find a way around. And there's a really good ADHD Twitter community as well. So every now and then I found, you know, sort of solutions to problems by checking in with the ADHD Twitter hashtag and like asking questions. I follow Black Girl Lost Keys, who is American based, I believe. She does some amazing stuff, and there's another illustrator called Danny Donovan, who's on Twitter and Instagram, and she actually just launched a workbook which is specifically designed to help ADHD people get things done. It's called the Anti Planner, so that might be worth checking out.